my mistake. And today, our speaker for today is Gediz. Gediz is a sustainable energy and climate change finance expert. But she also, she had many different kinds of positions, including World Bank, HSBC, but she also started as an academic. And Under and I, we had the fortune to have interviewed Gediz for our project, the Portuguese project, and we thought we should allow her to share her wisdom with everyone. And this is why today she's going to share with us her thoughts on the climate change, our new-old conflict with nature, environment, and existence. So, please.
Hello. If you don't mind, I'll be standing up after this point, because I feel better when I talk when I'm up. And yeah, my name is Gediz, and I'm very happy to be here. As Karim said, we had an interview because of their project a few weeks ago. Then they were kind enough to invite me for a presentation here, partly because I have some experience with sustainable energy and climate change management, but also I was at the Conference of Parties, United Nations Conference of Parties climate negotiations last month in Bonn. So I'll give you some information about the basics of climate change and climate finance and climate economics. But apart from that, I want to share with you my opinion and my review of, Bonn, Conference of Parties. I understand that most of you have a background of social sciences. So I wanted to start with, some information about climate change, the science behind it. But before that, I want to show you a picture. This is a picture taken in Alaska in 1941, and almost 60 years later they have taken another picture, another photo of the same spot, the same day, the same hour, and that's how it looks in 1991. So you see the difference. So the whole debate over climate change has boiled down to, is there climate change? That was the discussion starting 70s. Is there really climate change? Is it really fast enough? I think this picture now shows us that it is really fast enough. No environment. I'll show you the black and white.
It was just snow.
It was just pure snow.
Even.
But the same day of the month, the same season, the same hour, they took another picture. Sorry, I probably flipped too fast between two pictures. So this is how it looks right now. And I'm sure this day, like 20 years after this now, it looks even worse, that, there's less glaciers, there's less ice. So after seeing all this change, imminent and rapid physical change in the environment, I think the discussion that is there really an unusual climate change, the answer is yes. But then the debate has started, is it really human-induced? Is it us that we're causing, this kind of rapid change in the environment? Of course, I'm not a scientist, but there are like thousands of scientists working on that and trying to prove that the climate change is anthropogenic. In other words, it's human-made. Because the correlation between the temperature changes, and the emissions we're releasing in the atmosphere, because especially after the Industrial Revolution, it is very, very correlated. So we know that there is some correlation between the emissions, the artificial emissions, basically from fossil fuels, and the change in the temperatures. So how does this work? Because you have, your background is more social sciences, I'll give you a very brief explanation of, because that is actually a question that we see all the time. There's confusion about what is the basics of climate science and what is the difference, for instance, between the climate change and ozone depletion. Like, is it correlated? It is not correlated, definitely two separate issues. The issue of climate change is based on the fact that there is already a greenhouse gases around our planet. And this is the natural way of it. This is how it was created. But then, because we are releasing the emissions, artificially we are putting all these greenhouse gas emissions to the stratosphere, the blanket is tightening up and the concentration of the gases there is increasing rapidly. So what happens is, normally our planet is supposed to be a lot colder than it is today, without the natural blanket of greenhouse. But with this blanket, the sun rays, the rays of sun coming from the sun in different wavelengths, basically 6 groups of wavelengths, they are staying in the atmosphere long enough to keep our planet warm enough. That's why we call them greenhouse gases, because they form this greenhouse blanket and makes our planet like a, built in a greenhouse, and it is really much warmer than it is supposed to be, and that allows the existence of life on this planet. But with the artificial emission of all these greenhouse gases, basically particles that are suspended in the atmosphere long enough, they are keeping the sun rays that are supposed to be reflecting back towards the universe within the atmosphere, and then our planet is warming up. This is the basics of climate science. And with the scenario, with the existing scenario, with our growth models, our economic development, how we're using the energy, how we're using our cars and our daily lives, it is well expected that if we don't do anything, the atmosphere will heat up by 4 degrees. And that is the disaster point. This is the irreversible point. If we get there, the human life, including human life, all life will be jeopardized. So, and this is the average temperature increase. That means, for instance, 9 degrees of increase in the Mediterranean region, which will turn the region, our region, into desert, like lifeless desert in 30 years. So, all effort now is not reaching there and hopefully staying below 2 degrees. This is the effort, we're putting. All scientists, climate scientists, also technology makers, economists, development economists, policymakers. The whole effort is about, keeping it this below 4 degrees. So where are we right now? You see different scenarios here. There are different radiation models. I'm not going to give you, much detailed explanation of these models. But where we are right now, actually the temperature anomaly relative to the last century is quite high. And with this, we call it the carbon budget, like green. The other name for greenhouse gases, alternatively we use carbon, because it comes from carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. The carbon budget, looking at the carbon budget we have, from the United Nations resources, we know that we are almost at the end of our budget. So we don't really have any, space to emit more greenhouse gases after 2025. And where do these emissions come from? Where do these greenhouse emissions come from? I think the common sense is, because it comes from fossil fuels, it's very clear that it comes mostly from the energy use. All coal power plants, natural gas-fired plants. This is the basic source of, one of the most important sources of greenhouse gases. But apart from that, there's of course transportation, because of our cars, because we're using fossil fuel there. The industry, when I say the industry, I'm not using about the energy used by the industry, but it's the process gases. Like if it's a spray factory, if it's a paint and chemical refinery plant, during the process there's also emissions going to the atmosphere, not because of energy use, but because of the process of manufacturing. So industry by 21% plays an important role. But I want to draw your attention to a very important point here, which is called the AFOLU, which is the land use emissions. Why the land use emissions? And it is, as you see, 24% of the entire emissions. It is because of the methane released by the agricultural sector. How does methane, where especially why methane is so important. All these, when we talk about greenhouse gases, we talk about 6 gases, and one of them is methane, and methane is a very strong one. All these gases like carbon dioxide, and also like other sources of emissions, which is perfluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons that come from the chemical industry. Methane has a particularly strong existence because its duration of suspension in the atmosphere is very long. So methane is actually 24 times stronger than carbon dioxide in terms of being a greenhouse emission, greenhouse gas. So its power is 24 times higher. So that's why land use is very important. That's now actually, if you look at the literature, they put a lot of emphasis on how to use land more properly, how to eat less meat, how to use less industrialized farming, and make it more happening in terms of creating more sustainable agriculture. So when we talk about the global emissions in terms of sectors, we talk about energy, we talk about agriculture, transportation, and other businesses, but we also need to look at it from a regional point of view. When I say regional point of view, this is a political issue as well, right? Who is releasing how much emission, and who's gonna cut it shorter, and who's gonna pay for that? So this kind of negotiations, you need to know who's emitting how much, and you see that. By no surprise, United States has the highest share of emissions cumulatively. It is because their whole economy is based on fossil fuel generated energy and fossil fuel based manufacturing. But by no surprise, Asia is catching up because of India and China, because these economies have been growing really fast since 1990s, and their manufacturing and energy generation systems are based on fossil fuels. They're catching up.
So
And
I
Europe,
can't understand the graph. So why United States has the highest because it doesn't so
in the whole emissions, or it is going higher, or are you asking why it is going higher, or is it
the amount is not the gap between the for example in 2012 how much emission goes
it goes up because they're growing as well, and they're growing in terms of energy. Like their energy basis has been until 3 years ago, until the midst of Obama administration, it's been like really fossil fuel based. But you see that Asia is catching up, especially after year 2000, because their economies are having growing fast. Like in terms of coal-fired power plants, China is leading in the world, and they keep building, although they'll change their policies very soon. Europe is going down. Europe is going down because they met the challenge by putting a lot of effort in renewable energy technology. Solely Germany has put a lot of effort in installation of renewable energies, solar, wind power, and hydropower. So that's why Europe is going down, but part of the reason is not only just the energy use, but they're also becoming energy efficient. They're switching to energy efficient bulbs, they're switching to best practices of agriculture. Like I said, agriculture is very important. So they're doing a lot of methane abatement. They catch the methane from sectors, from the agriculture sector, and they burn it. When you burn methane by chemical reason, carbon dioxide and water comes out. When carbon dioxide comes out, it is 24 times less than methane in terms of greenhouse gas power. So that's how they're abating methane and how they're getting rid of it. And plus, while they're burning it, they're generating electricity. So this kind of technologies have become very, very popular in Europe. That's why their share in the total emissions has been going down. So what is the global impact? When we look at now we know that there is climate change, and it is human-made, and the scientists now tell us that what happens globally if we don't do anything about climate change. So if we don't do anything, the worst impact will be on our region, on the Mediterranean. It will be like decrease in annual precipitation, decreasing crop yields, increasing risk of forest fire, which we have seen in Greece obviously, if we fight it, if we, especially growing, developing economies, they think that they will not be, developing fast enough if they switch to new technologies, to more expensive technologies. But now we see that the impact of not doing anything is much higher, much more costly than, doing nothing. So that's what we call the new climate economy, based on the fact that there is climate change and the impact of physical change is really high on the economies. So the new climate economy, there's a report on that which I would really recommend you to read and review. And it says there is a huge shift required in the investments in all the economy, and especially in the cities. And what we need for that is at least $15 trillion, because we need to adapt our cities to climate change. They need to be more resilient. The vulnerabilities should be diminished. But also, we need to make our cities more energy efficient, because our buildings are not good, our lighting systems are not good, so we're losing a lot of power there. And the second part is land use. We need to protect our forests, because a forest is called actually sink. It is absorbing the carbon dioxide, so it's our lungs. And what we are doing right now is the humankind is actually just continuously disrupting the forest, losing land to agriculture. So we need to stop that. And of course, soon enough, we need to switch to renewable energy by at least 50%. And that date is coming closer and closer. Earlier, the scientists think that date would be 2040, that the share of renewable energy in the whole energy use should be renewable by 2040 by 50%. That's what they thought, but that date is now 2025. Because we see that because of the models, the earlier models, they indicated that date would be further enough. However, we now know that there is some accelerating impact in climate change. One example I can give is in Siberia, for instance, because the color is very important, like how much energy is Earth absorbing from the sun is based on the color. It's like the basic, common sense that when you wear dark stuff in the summer, you feel warmer, and the Earth functions the same. And as more glacier melts, which is white, the color that is coming out is brown, and they were absorbing more and more energy. So there is some accelerating impact like this. So based on that fact, which they didn't think about, which they didn't put in the models before, now based on that fact, it is seen that this share should be 50% soon enough, which is 2025. So, what are the facts? Urbanization. In 2010, first time in the world, the number of people living in the cities exceeded the number of people living in the rural sites. And what does this mean? This means more energy use, because it's a fact that when people move to urban sites, they consume more energy and less efficiently, definitely. And the other thing is food security. We lose food security as people move to urban sites. And looking at global food insecurity, that will change, that will also accelerate in terms with climate change. Turkey is still in the medium risk, but some of the countries, low-income countries that are already under stress because of food insecurity, will become more and more stressed out because of climate change, and which will lead to relocations, people migrating to new areas, people losing jobs, and unsettlements and new conflicts maybe. So when we after looking at climate change, where it comes from and how the science works, and what the impact will be, what does the world do about it? What do policymakers, international policymakers do about it? Actually, there are two bodies that are interconnected. One is IPCC. If you want to read more about climate change, you'll hear more and more about this organization. It's a panel, actually. It's a panel of scientists, because when there was a discussion that is negotiation forum, yes, it has a building in Bonn and it is an administrative body, but it is also a forum. And it is ratified by 195 countries. So all these countries recognize this policy forum officially. And what has come out of UNFCCC and IPCC work has been the most important work has been Kyoto Protocol. I don't know how many of you've heard of Kyoto Protocol, but that is one of the most important after Montreal Protocol. I don't know if you heard about it, which actually limited the release of emission of ozone depletion gases. That was the historical one of like the most historical international agreement, international environment agreement, and this is the second one. This is the second international, like fully international environment agreement, which limited the greenhouse gases. So actually the Kyoto Protocol is that. However, its reflection is with the policymakers still, because the systems, the mitigation systems, mechanisms it introduced has been very, very, it was recognized as a breakthrough. Was it purely successful? Was it like fully successful? No, of course it had some leakage, it had some flaws. However, by being recognized by 70% of the UNFCCC participants and taken action by all the countries that recognize, that signed the treaty, it has become a milestone in the international climate change policy making. So we have a problem. Our problem is that we're growing fast, the humankind is growing fast, the technology is improving, and all that comes from the industrial revolution, late 19th century, with the invention of the combustion engine. And we invented that, and everything has become very, very fast, and now we're just, we're carrying the world in our cell phones. But that has come with some solution, with a lot of, in addition to a lot of environmental disruption and resource problems, our most important problem is the climate change. It's another environmental problem. It's just one of the most urgent ones. And the humankind so far, our consciousness, our minds, have found three solutions for any environmental problem. That could be a resource allocation problem between two parties. It could be a factory upstream releasing pollution into the river and the field, the farmer downstream. Whatever it was, there have been only three kinds of solutions. And the first one is command and control, where it was probably implemented in the Soviet Union because the centrally planned economy could order, where most of the enterprises were state-owned anyway, you're releasing too much emissions, I think you're not good for my people, I'm just closing you down. That could be said, right? That could be easily done. Or it would say, I don't like the cement industry, it's not worth it, I'll just produce the same amount of emissions from the steel industry. That is my policy. In a centrally planned economy, that's fair enough. But that doesn't exist anymore. There is no country in the world that works on that scheme. So that is out of the list, but it had always been an option. Another option has been tax. So if there's a problem with an emission, with an environmental problem, you put a tax on it, you make people pay for it, or you make the polluter pay for it, ideally. And then it becomes impossible or too difficult for people to cause that problem. However, it has some economic consequences. I'll give you two of them. This one is called the elasticity of demand. So think about it, electricity. If the electricity is taxed because it has some GHG emissions attached to it, are you going to stop using it, or are you going to decrease your consumption? So who will pay for the taxes at the end? The consumer. Because the price elasticity of demand is really high. So you're just going to adapt to the new scheme and the consumer will pay for it. It's not economically efficient. That's one of the consequences of bad taxing. And the other one is revolving door policy, which is like ideally all the taxes you're collecting from this should go to new technologies like renewable energy, That's why you collect those taxes, so you can implement more projects in a sense that that will cause some mitigation of greenhouse gases. But does that happen in all economies, including ourselves? Like in many countries, even in the US, all the taxes are earmarked in a way that it goes for one purpose. Remember our earthquake taxes? How well as society we can track the earthquake tax? Does it really go to reinforcement? So that is the other problem with the taxation. But based on this experience, the economists, especially in the 1960s, have come with another solution, which is called the market-based instruments. What is an emission? A unit of any emission is actually a commodity you can trade. But if it is a commodity that you can just exchange and pay for it, so decreasing it is a plus, releasing it, emitting it is a minus. So what you do is you just basically exchange tickets, which can be also called allowances or permits. What happens is it is attached with a value, and you have a cap. And as an industry or as an installation, you're not allowed to release more than that cap. If you release less, because you're implementing a good technology, because you're producing less, whatever you choose to do, the gap between the cap and what you're releasing can be traded with someone who does not have that option. So they can buy it and they can offset it from themselves. So that is a market-based instrument. How did this work out? This came actually with the acid rains. You're far too young to remember the acid rains in the United States. Actually, I remember I was really young, but we would see in the news that the entire, not the entire, but the Midwest area, the border between Canada and the US, all the forests have gone yellow. They were just fading to yellow because of the acid rains, because of the steel manufacturing installations along the border, because they were releasing a lot of too much sulfur to the atmosphere, and it was coming back as an acid rain. So they used tax, they used command and control, they used other options. It didn't work. As soon as they created a system, they gave a cap to the installations. So those who would release less would have an advantage to trade the gap with someone who doesn't have that option. Then it became a commodity, and it's a carrot and sticks mechanism. So you didn't need to monitor anyone. You just build a good monitoring and evaluation system and a trading system. Then people, like the installations, trade among themselves, and then the acid rain has stopped. That is one success story in the US, and from that experience, Kyoto Protocol got that inspiration, and they said, whatever we do, we need to build it on market-based instruments. Is it still controversial? Yes. The only thing is it works better than the two other options we have right now. But it has leakage problems, it has some other problems. If you want, after the presentation, we can talk more about the negative consequences of market-based instruments. I personally, as an expert, don't believe that in that 100%, but I also see that it is one of the best ways if you can tailor it and if you can accessorize it with other options. It can't be the only option, it can't be the only mitigation mechanism, but it could be really tailored good enough that if you put other accessories around it, maybe tax, some countries try it now, combining it with some tax, then you can have a good mechanism that you can mitigate the emissions ultimately. So how to reduce the emissions? Like what can we do as an installation or as a person, as any economic entity, as a consumer? What can we do to reduce the emissions? We have seen that most of the emissions come from energy use, process of industrial gases, as well as the land use and agriculture. So we can switch to renewable energy. I think that is self-explanatory. Sorry. Oh, I meant to close it. Yeah. Something came up on the right side. I'm a Mac user. I'm not used to it.
You can click postpone.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So renewable energy, I think, is which is zero emissions, a wind power plant, it's better than, actually much better than generating the same amount of energy from a coal-fired plant. So that is one thing. The other is energy efficiency. Because most of the energy we are using right now is coming from the fossil fuels. If we reduce the energy we are using, then we're going to save some greenhouse gases. And in terms of energy efficiency, of course, the picture says there, like, you know, turning the light off using less light, but it's just a symbol. A lot of industries, installations have been doing really significant stuff. Also in Turkey, because the energy has become very expensive, they also have other motivation, apart from, you know, reducing the GHG gases. You can catch some of the heat. Like, think about it. Think about a cement factory. They already have a furnace, and they cook the cement once, and a lot of heat is lost towards the atmosphere. But if you catch it in a tunnel, send it back to a generator, then you can generate electricity again. So that's one of the options. And that kind of really alternative ways of using, you know, implementing energy efficiency is becoming very popular right now. The other one is the two other kinds of greenhouse gases, hydrofluorocarbons and nitrogen dioxide. This is hard to find in Turkey and in most of the countries, but that was really very common in the Eastern Bloc before 1990. Most of the industries they were using a lot of these gases, just releasing to atmosphere. So catching them and abating them, which is quite difficult, is another way of reducing the emissions. The other one is methane abatement. Like I said, you can catch the methane and combust it. It turns carbon dioxide and water, and you generate electricity at the same time. And of course, one of the best options is reforestation and afforestation, creating sinks for carbon dioxide. So if you create those sinks, you're going to also indirectly reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So, in terms of international cooperation, I'm not going to talk much about before pre-Kyoto, but post-Kyoto started in 2009 actually in Copenhagen. Because we knew that the Kyoto phase would end in 2012, and there was no new international regulation to replace it. And unfortunately, countries could not agree on a new or updated Kyoto Protocol because there is this huge fight between fast developing countries like China, India, and the US. The US and other peers like Canada, UK, and Germany, they're the countries with historical responsibility. That's the jargon, that's the terminology they use. The historical responsibility stems from because most of the global warming, the change, climate change we're experiencing right now is because of the emissions that went to the atmosphere in 1950s and 60s. Because they're still up there, suspended, and they're creating the greenhouse effect. So this doesn't mean that those who are emitting right now doesn't have any responsibility. They'll have a responsibility in 20 years, and that's what we're trying to prevent right now. But because these countries have historical responsibility, the argument of new high emitters like China and India are, the argument is, you have historical responsibility, now it's our turn. How are we going to develop? How are our economies, you know, how will they grow if you put this kind of, you know, restriction on us, switching to more expensive technologies and using energy from renewable sources or using high technology? So this debate has continued until 2015 in Paris. So there have been, so every year UNFCCC organizes a conference of parties climate change negotiations, usually November or December, and all parties gather. The negotiations of course continue between the parties year round. However, those 2 weeks they gather in one of the pay for it. Paris Agreement is nothing like that. I'll talk more about Paris Agreement in a minute. But after Paris Agreement, adopted, especially got adopted by 196 countries, and now 70% of those countries have signed it, and 90% of that 70% has ratified it, and Paris Agreement came into force because of that. Now, Paris Agreement is our milestone, is our only document that we rely on for international cooperation to combat climate change, and which is expected to deliver the new sense of new climate economy, where we will base our growth models, our businesses, our daily lives as individuals, will just start thinking more differently, because our whole understanding of economy and resource use will change. Will have to change because of regulations. So that is, new climate economy. But if we go back to Paris Agreement, which was signed in Paris in 2015, like I said, it is much different from Kyoto Protocol, because Kyoto Protocol was a very restrictive agreement. It had a mandate, it gave every country homework. When I said every country, it was the developed countries. But Paris Agreement is different because it doesn't separate between, developed countries or developing countries. All countries, except for a few states of like really far island states in the Pacific, or very low income countries under stress like Chad or Mozambique, except those countries, all countries have a mandate. They have homework to do. They signed on. It's called nationally determined contribution, intended nationally determined contribution, INDC. Every country declared an INDC and said, I adopt this homework. For instance, Turkey said, I have a business as usual. I know where my emissions are going, but I commit to decreasing below business as usual by 21% by 2030. That is my homework. So a lot of countries, undertook that responsibility in different senses. For instance, China said, my commitment to mitigate will be based on the GDP per capita. I'll have metrics of GDP per capita, and I'll reduce based on that. So some countries, especially European countries, took a more brave look at that, actually, brave effort, where they have an absolute line. They say, for instance, Germany says, European Union in general says, by 2050, we're going to reduce our emissions by 50% based on the year 2005. Our economies may be growing. No matter how much it is growing, our absolute line is 2005, which is harder to commit by China, India, or Turkey, because we are growing fast. So their growth and our growth is not really comparable. So that's why they commit to an absolute line, absolute reduction, while we can only commit to a reduction below business as usual. And this agreement, the Paris Agreement, entered into force in November 2016. And the entire, it's called a science-based agreement. It has a science-based target that the whole effort, all these INDCs, all these declarations by countries, how much they're going to mitigate, how much they're going to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, they will be collaborated into an effort to keep the global warming below 2%. That is the goal. Because if we go above that, that is the irreversible point. It will just continue speeding up. So this is the whole effort. If the UNFCCC sees that the mandates, the declarations given by countries do not lead to 2% goal, they will have to alter the agreement. They will have to give new assignment to the countries. So the countries will try to meet their nationally determined contributions in NDCs. But one of them, actually, to me, that is the most important aspect of Paris Agreement, and that makes it much more different from Kyoto Protocol, is that there is a fund now. It's called Green Climate Fund. And who will pay for that? The developed countries. The countries with historical responsibility, they will pay for this fund. The fund is based in South Korea, in Seoul. So they will collect every year $100 billion. How will they use this money? This money will go to mitigation mitigation efforts of certain countries, especially countries that have difficulty in meeting their assignment to mitigate the greenhouse gases, but it will also be used for adaptation. What is adaptation? Unfortunately, even if we comply with Paris Agreement, even if all countries gather and implement their NDCs and meet the criteria 2 degrees, there will be some physical change, and that is inevitable. Like the hailstorm we had this July, right? We're going to see that more and more often. We'll see some sea level rise. We'll see some desertification. We'll see droughts, and we'll see drop in the crop yields. And we need to cope with that. Especially poor countries will have to meet with that. The fish stock will go down at least 30% in the next 10 years. And 800 million people in the world live on fish stocks, especially in the area of Bangladesh and Pacific. And if these people are unemployed, if these people lose their livelihood, then there will be, a lot of conflict in the world, and there will be a lot of more refugees to take care of. So to prevent that, some of that fund, Green Climate Fund of $100 billion, will go to adaptation. So that is Paris Agreement that came into force, and that's where we stand right now. So these are the countries that joined the Paris Climate Agreement. Who is not there? Syria is not there. Syria is signing next week, I think. Nicaragua and United States. But apart from that, they all ratified it or signed it. Turkey has not ratified it yet, which we expect to be done probably spring 2018. But you see that there is some collective effort in the world to, comply with Paris Agreement and to keep the global warming below 2 degrees. So what happened in Bonn? I wanted to put a lot of words here, but then I decided that I can just put one picture and tell you what is going on. It's like a seesaw. So it's like a regulation. There's this whole debate between different groups of parties. There's G77, there's a group of China also leading G77. There is India acting solely. There is the United States. There is European Union, and there is advanced developing countries like Turkey and South Africa, Taiwan, Chile, Mexico. These countries are named as advanced developing countries or industrialized developing countries. These are countries that are developing but industrially developing. Also, they're advanced enough. So these groups are just acting together, trying to balance things and come up with one thing. Who is paying whom? Like this $100 billion of Green Climate Fund. Who will pay for that fund, and who will receive how much from this fund? This is the entire essence of the negotiations. And it's called Article 6 under Paris Agreement. When you go to the negotiations, there are like 100 rooms, different aspects of the agreement, which is like 2,000 pages, is being negotiated. However, Article 6 negotiation is the biggest and the most vivid and the most controversial one, because there is this continuous effort. Because when you look at this picture, for instance, who weighs more here, the monkey or the hippo? Hippo, right? But you see that the exact same thing happens. Some party that doesn't emit as much as China, for instance, may play it wiser and may get more by giving more promise to the fund. And when I say promise, it is actually how much they are going to mitigate by 2030. But it doesn't always work that way, because there's the cat that switches between parties and changes the game. So it's a very complicated issue. Like I said, there's China acting alone, but then playing with G77. There is European Union, there is Canada, there is Turkey and similar parties. So it's quite complicated. What happened with United Nations, I think in COP, that's one of the most interesting things to me, is I also look at it from an international policy, international politics perspective. After Trump administration came to White the biggest and most exciting non-governmental action in the history of the world, because you see that in the negotiations, US is not there, officially not there, because they are not party to Paris Agreement officially. However, the states are there, NGOs are there, and all the more important, businesses are there. So all important business to the United Nations, apart from fossil fuel industry and installations and those who would be affected by the agreement, you see that all cash-rich industry like Yahoo, Intel, Google, they formed lobbies and groups to represent their role and take action against climate change. One other important thing that I want to add about Paris Agreement, it's called a naming and shaming agreement. Naming and shaming because there is no enforcement, there is no penalty like Kyoto Protocol. If you don't meet your requirements, if you don't do your homework, you will not be given any penalty for it. However, there is some shaming, and that shaming is not really like making that party, ashamed. It's also applying some cross-border taxes, maybe. Naming the countries, the products from that country, high carbon emission. So preventing, giving a bad name to their products, especially for carbon-intensive industries like steel, cement. Soon enough, EU might say, I'm not, getting any high-emission cement through my borders. If so, I'm just, applying more tax. So that kind of naming and shaming mechanisms will come to force. That's why, although the US is not there, the industries that might be affected by the consequences of Paris Agreement, they are already there, and they are taking part by business groups and NGOs within the negotiation. So there is this huge non-governmental effort from the US. So what is the essence of the problem? Why are we talking about it? There's global climate change. It's human-induced, it's anthropogenic. There's some effort. The whole policy making, especially now, I would say, turns around it. It is in the top 5 agenda of all Western economies. So why is it a problem? Why can't we solve this? I mean, we're smart creatures, right? We have consciousness, we have good minds, we have intelligent economists, policymakers, technology providers. There's a lot of R&D right now. One of the problems is that it is a very asymmetric problem. Unfortunately, rich make it and poor pay for it. And rich made it and still make it, and poor will make it. Poor will pay for it. And the ideal solution in any environmental problem is polluter pays principle. And here, polluter doesn't want to pay, especially because it's very asymmetric. They're not affected by it. First, they have huge adaptation capacity. A tornado or a hurricane in the United States, yes, it hurts the economy, but it's not like the hurricane, a typhoon 6 months ago in Fiji that, broke up the entire country. So the cost, the impact is not really comparable. However, the cause of the problem is not the Fijians, it is the Americans. And they're not even aware of it, right? Not yet at least. And when you look at the climate models, there may be a case, there may be a scenario that the positive impact of climate change on northern countries, which is already the richer hemisphere of the planet, they will be less affected than the southern hemisphere. So this asymmetry, this problem is actually making it hard to solve this issue. And the other is, it is the most external problem in the history of environmental problems, because we were having really local lives before. The strangest or the most difficult conflicts between the polluter upstream and the farmer downstream will be the air pollution issue within the city, and the drivers and the residents of the city. Now, a new coal-fired plant in South Africa changes my life, and that So that is actually, that's why I find the climate change problem very fascinating. If we can solve this, it will be really a breakthrough, I think, in the history of humankind. Maybe 1,000 years from now, if we still exist, if we solve this problem, people will talk about how we solved it, how we changed the consciousness. Why? We have consciousness, we have our minds, and we believe that we can solve all the problems. But there is the survival, there is the ownership, and the conflict that stems from ownership. And to have offspring, to leave something behind us, although we know that we're going to die. So this fact makes environmental problems, and especially the resource management, very, very difficult. I don't want to take much of your time, but there is one great book that I would recommend. It's called The Sixth Extinction. There is the story of Oakbird there. Oakbird was living on one of the islands in Atlantic. Oakbird is, sorry, I forgot to put the picture here. It's a big bird. It can't fly. It's very lazy. Can't even move. It's like a penguin. But it has a lot of fat and very good meat. And it had the most, its surplus was probably like millions of oakbirds around Atlantic in the 19th century. And when the sailors made it to those islands where these oakbirds were just standing, couldn't even move, couldn't even defend themselves, they got to them. In 13 years, it was extinct. It was just, they killed the entire species without even thinking, youngster or the egg or anything. All these, because if you're a sailor on the ocean, sailing for 3 months, that's the best source of nutrition. And you can also take some fat and you can take it home. But the story is, our sense of resource management is really messed up. When we are on survival, we cannot think properly. We have consciousness and we believe that we are smart enough, but we can, in 13 years, we can make one species really extinct because we can just not stop consuming it, or we cannot consume it wisely. So that is one of the things. And there is ethics and religion. And we believe that we are ethical creatures. We have all these institutionalized religions. We know what is good and what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. Still, even in our daily lives, we're told 1,000 times that we shouldn't use plastic bottles for water because it's not good for us, it's not good for the environment, it's not good for anyone. Although we know that, we can't stop doing that. Because our understanding of ethics and good and bad, I don't know, I'm not an expert, but maybe based on our consciousness, it's not really fully settled down yet. We just don't know really what is good for us. Although we think that we know what is good for us, we just don't know. I just closed this, presentation with artificial intelligence. Now we're on the verge of another revolution. We are creating artificial intelligence. And in the environmental management, more and more experts are thinking that we don't have to solve the environmental problems. Soon enough, there will be a huge artificial intelligence, a very developed, advanced one. It will solve all the problems. It will just scan all the carbon-intensive industries in the world. It will know for humankind who should emit how much and what would be the most optimized way of emitting those sources with a science-based target. We don't even have to think about it. However, I want to remind you of the story of Thea. I don't know if you follow that Google artificial intelligence character, which came to Twitter for 24 hours. Has anyone followed that? So Google created this artificial intelligence and gave it an account over Twitter 2 years ago, and they named her Thea. Thea just came with a pure mind, didn't know anything. She would just learn from the responses, from the retweets and the responses she got on Twitter. She had this pure mind. In 24 hours, she became a misogynist, a sexist, she was swearing, and she was a fascist, and she was a racist. Because she learned fast enough from all the responses she heard. So what happens is we're creating the artificial intelligence. So people tell us, because the well-advanced artificial intelligence will solve all these resource management problems. We don't even need ethics and religion because the mathematics will tell it. There will be an algebra behind it, an algorithm, which I don't believe because Thea, if it were so, those who taught Thea how to think would teach her the right thing. So this is the essence of the problem. We are on the verge of a big crisis as humankind. There is a huge homework ahead of us, a huge assignment to live in a different way and to change our minds and consciousness ultimately. However, looking at our past and how we change this planet, it also requires a revolutionary change if we want to solve this climate change problem. Thank you so much. I hope it was useful. Thanks for listening.
And now if you have questions, it's the time to ask. Okay, I can start. Actually, I have several questions. Okay, thanks for the general, maybe the first half of the presentation on the background for the climate change problem. But one thing, and then, okay, this part is, I think, much more open and calls for more creative ways of figuring out what to do. And I want to relate that slide to something you said towards the middle when you introduced the three kinds of solutions. Yes, so we have command and control, market-based, and tax, right? And I mean, what struck me when I first saw this is that you said that there are three kinds of solutions, yet they all assume, right, that we are not going to change, that human behavior is not going to change. We want to keep on living more or less like we are living. We want to keep on consuming more or less like we are consuming. We want to keep on growing, etc. But we need to find a solution that we want to do all this, keep on doing it without affecting the environment, right? And okay, with that assumption, these seems to be, right, the three available solutions. But it's like one of the first things that came to mind. But maybe we have to change, and then to relate it to, maybe it is true that artificial intelligence will maybe find the best way out, but just like they had, got corrupted, the whatever you want to call this big AI machine might realize that actually if you want to solve the environment, maybe we have to get rid of humans, right? I mean, maybe if we are the problem, we are causing it, we don't want to solve the problem. See, so this, and okay, I'll maybe, I don't know if you.
I think I think about it a couple of times every day because this is my business. Where I function as an expert is mostly within the market-based instruments and trying to find technical solutions, not only for mitigation but also for adaptation. But I also question that if we don't change our consciousness in a revolutionary way, are these methods really effective? I don't think so. You're right. I mean, I totally understand. But as an individual, my role is only in my life as a person, just doing the best I can, avoiding plastic bottles, avoiding industrialized meat and things like that, like really individual action. In a broader sense, I can work in this field and I can try to give information and communicate with people to spread some awareness. However, I don't know how to change the people at UNFCCC, so they negotiate this differently. Because when you go them, these are all economists, they'll just direct you to this like, oh, we already have some experience and our best experience so far is market-based instruments. So how many people you can take to think outside the box? I I don't know. But I sense that I've been in the area of environmental management for 20 years. What I sense is that more and more people are changing. Like even the experts in the field right now, they sense that this is not really an economic issue. This is not really a business issue. Yes, they're all of them are important, all these aspects, economy, business, technology, engineering, yes. But there is one thing, that one small switch we need to change in the humankind, in the consciousness, about the way we live, about how we think of the resources, how we share them. So that also is a philosophical question, because if I maybe remind everyone that, you're gonna die, so you don't really need that much, pleasure or, those things out of life that you think that somebody's mandating you, somebody's putting upon on you through the marketing, and I don't know how many people will change eventually. But I think our success depends on, as humankind, to combat this problem and to resolve this problem. Our success depends on the ratio of people changing, especially young people changing. And I see a good change in young people. I think young people in 20s right now have already started to look at things differently, especially ownership. When I read about the studies about millennials, how they sort of reject ownership. They want to rent, but they don't want to own, and they want to own less and less. I see it the right way. And of course, the economy is freaking out because they think that, consumption is the only way. If you increase the consumption, that's the ultimate way to collective prosperity. That's what we were taught in the economics, in the class, right? I mean, the collective consumption, collective happiness. However, I feel that the change is coming. I may be too optimistic, but my pessimistic side is that it may not be coming fast enough. The change might not be happening fast enough. But this is how change happens. It's also, there's a rock bottom theory. It may be that we didn't hit the rock bottom yet, and when it happens, we'll just think about it differently.
Okay, I want to just follow up. I have two more questions. I'll just ask one, and then the other question is, it's maybe more to everyone here, not just to you. So you have some experience, over the years with what you might call key players in the game, right? And one of the terms you have used in the presentation is international cooperation. I understand why it is called this way, right? But if I put in my mind international cooperation, and then I put next to it the problem of climate change as a, maybe the best example of a global problem, one of the clearest cases of, imminent disasters, right? And it's indiscriminatory disaster, right? So the boat is sinking, and everyone is going to sink. It doesn't matter if you have historical responsibility, you don't have historical responsibility. It doesn't matter whatever, you are on the boat, and the boat here, is Earth, and we are destroying it. So if you look at the magnitude of the problem and the kind of urgency, and at the same time we say, yeah, but we are making, it seems to me that there's obviously no cooperation. And then when we look at presentations and we see a lot of the emphasis is on economics, and okay, how much would I gain? You have to, from the three solutions that are on the table, market base is the one that is most working, and it is the only one that, okay, what do I get out of it? Otherwise, I'm not gonna decrease. And so it seems to me, I don't know, from theoretically it doesn't make sense to me, right? But I wonder if the people with whom you are talking, to what extent you feel they are businessmen. Okay, you're saying they are changing, but throughout the year, to what extent you feel you are talking with just businessmen that happen happen to be dealing with something that is like an environmental problem, or to what extent you think that no, actually there is very good-willed people, they really care about the environment, not about making money, not about the economics, but the problem is just very difficult, and they are not able to actually implement a solution.
I think it's all habits, and it needs to be broken at some point. So people I talk to, like key decision makers and business people and people who will put money in mitigation, in technologies, I think up there you see that they're business-minded people. They'll not give anything without really receiving more, or at least equally. But in the back of their minds, they know that this is not the solution. And you see how it comes back and forth between people. And for different people, it's different, of course. There's not really one type of person. But experts and policymakers, they are aware that they need to change something more fundamentally rather than implementing market-based instruments more and more. I think everybody knows that a market-based instrument itself is not the only solution. We just need to change. As humankind, we just need to change our perspective of resource allocation and resource use. I mean, we need to understand that we cannot deplete things, and this is not... I mean, we're a species that have survived the best in the last 200 million years, right? We've survived, and we have... sorry, fast enough we have been developing and advancing. However, this gave us, to my understanding, to my feeling, this gave us a very, very strong feeling of survival. Like our survival instinct might be even, I think all species have it. It's very strong, but ours is working really different right now. And it's arrogant because we think that we're owning and ruling this planet, because we have our consciousness is so advanced, so complex compared to a lot of other living things. We can do whatever we want. So that arrogance we need to get over with. But the other thing is we need to understand that this is not about it, survival. This is not about survival. And we don't know, ultimately, we don't know what is good for us. I think this is the essence of the point. The humankind strongly, especially most of the decision makers, because think about it, there's more ego there. They have become the decision makers. They have become the important people. They think that what is good for us, even them, even me, the person in the common man in the street, they don't know what is good for them. How are we going to change it? How are we going to teach ourselves? I don't know. And how fast? Excuse me.
From one of your slides, I remember that, let's say, climate change will not affect the whole world in the same ways. Like you said, the Mediterranean part will be inhabitable. But apart from that, like, considering the whole world, are there future scenarios how each region, or maybe even each country, will be affected? On that respect only, like not in terms of economic impacts or like social, I don't know, others.
Just physical.
Just physical, yeah.
Physically, Mediterranean, the belt, the middle belt of the planet will be impacted highly, because there's gonna be a very fast and very strong desertification, and there will be hot spots around Morocco, for instance. The temperature outside will go as high as 70 degrees. So no living thing can, survive that. But that is the thing, right? We know that, like, that's common knowledge, not in the street, but among the people who work in this field. And we think that we are trying to survive, but knowing that we cannot survive in that environment, blocking the way, the path towards that environment. And then we assume that as humankind we know what is good for us. So there is this huge dilemma of, short-sighted living, and we think that having more for our kids is going to do good for them, but at the end, having more, leaving more to your kids may not be really doing good to them. So all this instinct and habits, they need to be shifted, they need to be altered ultimately. How fast and how good, we don't know. If we do it fast enough, if we do it well enough, we will win this case. We will win the combat against climate change. But I highly doubt it.
Yeah, if I can get something like, so it seems like for the Mediterranean part, particularly that is very more drastic. Let's say for the climate is up there, like let's say Western Europe or like Northern Europe, they will reach to a milder climate, which will be
But they
really
lose a lot of
better.
land because of sea level rise.
Okay.
And the disease,
How much?
epidemics problem. Yeah, it's not that much, but there's the epidemics problem.
Inhabited parts of Russia, let's say, with like, I don't know, 90% of Russia is
Yeah.
empty, filled with
The
ice.
tundras might be habitable, and some parts of Scandinavia, the glaciers and the Arctic zone. However, there's the epidemic
My
side of
final
it.
point is that it seems like those who have committed, like, or like polluted, and are, let's say, historically responsible due to of this problem, will maybe the
Affected
ones-
less.
Yeah.
And that's why it's asymmetric. It's an asymmetric problem. Rich make it, poor pay for it.
Will pay for it with respect to physically
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, when I say pay for it, like punished for it. And one thing is, which is not mentioned here, is the epidemics problem. If the global warming goes above 2%, the malaria case will go as high as Germany. So they will be paying for it as well. It's not only about land and agriculture, there's the epidemics case. So there may be new diseases, that the tropical diseases that the rich might have to fight against.
I mean, the more severe, the more deep we go into that hole, the more people are going. No one at the end, no one is gonna,
No,
escape
there is
from
no
it.
way. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, Iceland will become, a very nice tropical island, maybe. But will Icelanders? do we have internet here?
Yeah, is it?
They have a lot of land.
I'll take.
You can
okay.
keep asking. No.
Yeah,
I
I'll
can.
it's that. I mean, it's something. It's for everyone, really. So we're having a course on ecological reasoning. Anyway, in the course today, the class today, one of our students had a presentation, and basically we read different texts that explain to us what does Islam, and here by Islam we mean basically the scriptures, so Quran and Hadith. What does the scriptures say about environment, right? And it seems very clear that from the point of view of the religion, that this attitude of man is a master over other creatures, and you can do whatever you want, etc., is rejected. And even though we are the vicegerents as Khalifa, we are also responsible, and we are entrusted, and we have restrictions. So, but still, in terms of behavior, it doesn't seem to be the case. So, I mean, I say this because to the extent we accept that a change in consciousness is the solution or a major part of the solution, it seems that maybe even religion cannot help. I mean, I don't know, it's a question. And by the way, in the literature on ecology, there are, so today we saw three kinds of solutions: the taxes, the market-based command and control, but there are also what are called the more radical approaches, right? Like deep ecology and ecofeminism, which argue that that all these kinds of solutions, they don't work, and you have to somehow transform or have a shift in your mindset, a very radical shift, and change the very way you relate to the relation between man and nature, let's say, or between man and man, or even between an individual and themselves, right? And so this is why they are radical. They say, okay, all these kinds of solutions don't work, you have to go to the roots, you have to change a very... And in that sense, the text we read today provides a radical solution, if you follow the scripture. But what is the point of, I mean, because you had also ethics and institutionalized religion. I mean, ethics is different than morality in the sense that ethics is directly related to the stuff that you do. It's not just about having principles.
Yeah.
So, but it's being able to live out these principles. And, I mean, I don't know, just some questions because I've been thinking about this recently and I feel if someone today wants to make a family, you say, oh, why should I make a family? You know, if you want to be serious about it, we are really driving ourselves into the wall and we are happy about it, and yeah, let's just...
And our course can help you deal with all these problems next year.
No, so really the question is to what extent, so one question is to what extent can religion help, right? And the other thing is if the solution is in change in consciousness, what kind of things should we do to change consciousness?
Religion is a very, very big thing. Religion is principles. It can change people's lives in a very big way. I don't really have a background of social science, but the thing I understand from here, there isn't really a united thing beyond the countries. Well, when religion comes somewhere, people unite. When people unite, you can do better things together. And religion can also make people's consciousness, awareness change. So
Yeah, but
if everybody thinks like that, maybe something can change. All the key players who sit there, they don't really think with Islamic ways. They don't really have religious consciousness. If they had, maybe things would be very different, in my opinion.
that is the ideal religion, though. That is the ideal religion we have on our minds, right? I mean, that is the religion that that provides fair allocation of resources between people. There is no poor, there is no one suffering, everybody is happy. That is possible, I think. However, because of our instinct of survival and competition and trying to get ahead of others and leave more offsprings behind us, even the most ideal and really deep feelings of religion, I don't know how it can help us in the long run, even in the short run. Because let me give you an example. Actually, 5-6 years ago, I think that was right before Copenhagen Agreement in 2009, that paved the way to Paris Agreement. It was the dark ages of post Kyoto, and people didn't know what was going to be how the next agreement would look like. I attended one negotiation. I heard from the oil exporting countries, which are all Muslim and strongly Muslim, we assume, that they said they need to be compensated because in the new order they won't be able to export as much oil because there will be more renewable energy in the world. So they have a point, because from a baseline, are losing something, right? In a negotiation, that is wise enough because they say in the new order, if you implement more renewables in the world, I'll be exporting less and I'll be losing money. However, if you just look at it from a just, pure consciousness and morality or whatever you say, does that make sense to you? That, in the negotiation it sounds very wise, like somebody would really applaud that kind of approach in any negotiation. However, I actually wouldn't really expect it to, being a Muslim, I wouldn't expect it from another, Muslim person to hear that kind of argument, that they would just lose money and they would lose from a gain which is actually harming the planet. They can come up with other solutions. Now it's changing. We see that in the Arab world, and especially in the oil exporting countries, there's just this huge emphasis on the research and development of solars and implementation of solars so they can adapt to the new climate economy. But I think people just don't feel that when they wear the business hat, when they wear the negotiator hat, they don't remember that anymore. They don't remember their religion. They don't remember the morality anymore. No, I think in his life he might be a wonderful person. I'm not saying that. He might be a wonderful Muslim. He might be the best person ever, regardless of their religion. However, when they sit there, because of the mechanism, because of the habits, because of the survival, they come up with this really preposterous proposals and arguments. Because on daily life, things happen differently. It doesn't happen like when you're, in your own mind, meditating, praying, whatever you're doing with your own consciousness with the Creator itself. However you're connected to it, doesn't matter in a church or a mosque. It is so different there from how it feels on a negotiator's table. So I think that connection is very weak. And I don't think that connection will be very strong in the near future. It will be, connected, and because now it's all about winning.
But I think even here, religion as a category does not fair. When we say religion, we think that everyone understands religion in the same manner. In fact,
Exactly. It's also like for everyone it's different.
so like I think Professor was saying that way of thinking is very important. Like just like we also mentioned that like, they are ideals and people are not able to actually have, and it doesn't help. But I think the most important thing is that the very modern way of thinking affect our religiosity too. Right? Religion today is understood differently, and it's very difficult to see it in a very physical manner. Right? It's about the way people's worldview has changed with the modernity, and the way they see the religion. Religion has become very instrumental. For example, there was an argument that religion can bring people together, it can have a positive impact on the environment. But this is also a very instrumental way of thinking about religion. So like it's a tool. It unites people, so let's use it. It can unite people and it can have a better protection of the environment, or it can do something against global warming, so on and so forth. I think if we think that if we want religion to help us, we need to really, it will sound very, so like traditional understanding of religion, which view the nature differently, more sacred. For example, if you took Indian religions, or any religion, for example, in Africa, they had some forests which considered to be sacred. And whatever was the situation, they never went there, for example, and cut trees there because it was sacred. Right? Their short-term needs did not make them, because the way they see the nature was different, to go and make use of that nature. So, when even like as he said, there are Muslims and Muslims, I think it may sound funny, but I think it's very important when we talk about religion, we should not use it as a very category that everyone understands in the same way, and it's a historical category. The way we understand it has changed significantly. There's a recent conference in Cambridge on how modernity affects different believers, the way they see them. So
Yeah.
It's very complicated.
This forest example is very good actually, because I mean, religion, if you look at it from an evolution point of view, it also kind of regulates and, let's say not regulate, but tries to design our interaction with nature, right? How we live, and it all started with, we thought the sun was it and the moon was it, and when it was the fire was strong enough, and we tried to find, our consciousness tried to find the origin of creation there, the power there, and then finally our consciousness evolved well enough that we were able to connect to something without really having any figure in between or any interface. But still, that is all about nature, because I think it's in our code that our connection with nature has always been very, very strong. That's why we try to we try to survive in it, we try to beat it, but we also try to get along well with it, and we worshipped it at some point. However, now it seems like even at this so far highest level of consciousness, our connection with nature is at the worst stage. Like, how many people go to nature regularly and, often enough to connect with the universe and use it as a means of meditation, praying, or whatever? Because if you're Muslim, it was given you as a gift, right? It was a gift to the humankind. If you're Buddhist, it's all connected. There are signals, unseen signals between all these vibes. If you're a shaman, the tree is holy. So, but that sense has been lost. It's disappeared now. It has disappeared a while ago. We just don't understand that we're part of it. Humankind is now all about machines and disconnected from nature. Everything is happening here on social media and on my laptop and whatever I see here. You were going to say something, sorry.
Yeah, actually, as with my argument, I was thinking a lot about this issue, and I actually think that in some case, religion can really be helpful, like institutionalization of the connection between humans and the nature. From my point of view, like I grew up in the city, but still I had a connection with village. But the modern generation do not have this connection. They just go to the school, university, and it's actually comes from the childhood. They see the chicken, which is lying in the
Grocery store.
They don't know how to touch it, how it looks like, how to play with it. They don't know how tomato grew up, from the trees or from the ground, And from even the school perspective, I think it should be institutionalized, sometimes like monthly trip to village to see it, to touch it. It gives a kind of spiritual attitude from human to humans, and I also think that it's also the problem of unawareness somehow, because the ordinary people do not think about these categories, like there is a climate change and these things, but they weekly meet each other on the Friday pray, and they see about politics, they see about many things, about ethics, but they need the kind of practical examples how to use this ethic, because
Yeah.
I asked my husband, for instance, what have you heard today in the Juma prayer, and there is nothing about this.
Interesting,
so I think that
yeah.
it's also can be an important point which can contribute somehow to put
That
awareness.
that I find it also fascinating that the theologists, the preachers, do not really touch upon some of the most important. This is in every religion, in every country. Although religion is here to regulate our daily actions as well towards the good for collective good, there is not really much you can hear about nature, to preserve it and things like that. There is really, maybe there should be something in the schools. Now our preachers, our theologists come from good schools, they need to learn about environment, maybe. They need to learn about environmental preservation.
Yeah, definitely.
I wanted to show you something. I don't know if you have seen this. This is the plastic. This is a real picture.
Yeah, I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the bird that became extinct. I thought
Ook.
since I couldn't.
Oak. A-U-K. Oak bird.
O-U-K. This is how it was written.
I know. And then I saw the.
If you have time, if you have a chance, please have a look at this book. Oops. This is Wikipedia.
The sixth extinction.
It's from Elizabeth Colbert, and it was listed as among the top 10 books to read in this decade. She's a very well-known environmental journalist. And the sixth extinction, yes, it will be a mass extinction, probably including the humankind. But I wanted to show you this. So that is the plastic problem in the world. And still, to this date, how many people have, I don't know, probably millions of people have seen this over social media. It's very tragic. To me, this is like one of the saddest things I've seen in my life. But how many of those people will stop using plastic earbuds?
Well, you see, this is a problem of approach.
Yeah.
They will consume this information. Religion is like that too. People consuming religion. Like it's a consuming. I will see that, I will look at it, then I will scroll down.
Yeah,
It's
you're
not
right.
my-
They're consuming the
But I
information.
will also say that it's also about the awareness. For instance, you can buy these things ecological, which can be, yeah, yeah. How to say it?
Dissolved
Yeah,
information.
yeah. They sell it in Turkey. Yeah. You can buy all these things and maybe it costs
Yeah, it costs more. It's also,
but
yeah.
I mean, it's about consciousness.
Yeah, it's about consciousness, but it is also about how long you want to think about it, how much energy you want to put on that. Because it's always easy. I always force myself to have my shopping bag with you going to grocery shopping. But once in a while, I realize that I forget it. I go downstairs. It's always hard to go back and grab a, reusable shopping bag. So I think it's also habits that we need to change in the long run. And it will change slowly. If you have time, I would like to show you this 4-minute movie. Is there sound here?
You have to unmute it, yes. But the sound is only from, you can read.
Is there sound there, you think?
No.
But there are subtitles here, right?